Phil fails at writing a theme song. He doesn't know the words to sing. If success is the flash in the pan, my friend, then failure's most everything. Phil fails for you. Phil fails for you. Phil fails for you. Phil fails for you.
I think that's a perfect segue for the second part of our discussion. Normally, I will invite the interviewee in a practice of grounding. I would like you to do it, if you would. I've shared with you, and I know you've got a ton of techniques, so I wonder if you would guide us through grounding exercises together.
Well, one of my favorites currently is a 5-breath pressure technique.
Okay.
That is an offshoot of what Wim Hof is doing with breathing, and other people have done with tantric kind of breathings before.
Okay.
But doing a 5-breath of pressure techniques helps to recenter and reorient you. Okay. In that process of holding your breath, so we're going to take 5 breaths together.
Okay.
And I'll coach us through this. On the 5th breath, you let your air out halfway, and they call it the sea level, right?
Okay.
So if I take a full breath, that's sea level. That's under the sea.
Okay.
So we're bringing our breath down to sea level, and then you're just holding. While you're holding your breath after 5 breaths, you can begin to conceptualize, if you're an adult with ADD, what do I need to do next? Do I need to recenter myself? Do I just need to sit in this kind of blissful state for a period of time? Or can I envision what I'm going to do next? So my wife, Edie, who is a brilliant ADHD life coach for young adults, uses a 3-minute technique to help her adults with a neurodivergency really look at life and plan it in this 3-minute segment. Okay, there's lots of ways to do this. I'm going to take us through this 5-breath pressure technique because I think it's one of the most effective ways for adults with ADD to get recentered in a very simple form.
Okay. What is there a unique way we're going to breathe? Is it through our nose or through our mouth?
We're going to breathe through our nose. If you can't breathe through your nose, you can breathe through your mouth. That's okay. But typically, I like people breathing in and out of their nose. And when you breathe, deep breaths, so you want your belly to move. You want it to press out. You want to get it down to the bottom of your diaphragm.
Okay.
And I'll take us through 5 breaths, and then I'll tell us what to do as we're going through it.
Eyes open or closed?
It doesn't matter. You can make a choice about that. And I also have this written up so that you can put it in your show notes.
Heck yeah.
So that people have a copy of it or a way to get back to it so they don't just have to try to remember it. Exactly.
Working memory is not our strong suit.
Right. That's why we use things like aids to help us.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a 5-breath pressure technique, and we're going to take 5 breaths together. So we're going to take our first full breath in and release. 2 and release. 3 and release. 4 and release. 5. Now, as you release, come halfway and stop. As you stop halfway with your breath, you allow yourself to experience the resource that you've gained with the blood flow and oxygen getting higher in the breaths that you took. So you allow yourself to relax in this restful state. You can think about something you want to do in the future. But as you feel the need to take a breath, when you feel the absolute need to take a breath beyond the shadow of a doubt, you're going to let your breath out completely and take a full breath in and hold it. And so we'll wait for Phil, since he is a good example, when he's ready to take a breath, but you'll let your breath out completely. Now take a full breath in, hold it. Now begin to tighten your stomach and pressure upward to where you begin to feel the blood flow and oxygen move up through your body to the top of your head. When you get to the pressure at the top of your head, you release your breath. You may feel a little dizziness and disorientation. That's normal. If it's significant or troublesome to you, you can always take your breaths much slower, and that could help with that disorientation to some degree. Mm-hmm. But this helps. This is a very simple recentering technique.
Yeah, that feels good.
I, in the last 2.5 years, have completely taken myself. I don't use caffeine, and I don't use refined sugars anymore.
Yeah.
If anyone knew me as a over 36-year recovering addict from drugs and alcohol, it's a miracle. And so what do I use to resource myself now? Breath. Breath and cold water. Wow. That's how I resource myself. Those are the most natural things in the world. I've been taking cold showers for 6 years, going on my 7th year. And you have to remember, so cold water work, we could talk about that, but with cold showers, I mean, anything like that, you work up over time. It took me 3 weeks of turning down the hot water to feel the cold, because you're functionally putting pressure or startling yourself on purpose as a resource. So every time I get into a cold shower, guess what? It startles me. It's your core response. Within 30 seconds to a minute now, I'm oriented to it, where it's blissful and wonderful. Yeah. It's wonderful. In Texas in the winter, we actually have cold water here. But I startle every time. Well, of course you are. That's your most natural response. That's what you are when you're a baby, right?
Yeah.
It keeps you alive.
Yeah. So
just exercising some grounding techniques on an ongoing basis help to resource you.
Yeah.
And, so my rituals now in the morning are very robust. These are things that I started overnight. They were very elevating to me. They were very disorienting to some degree.
And this this breath technique is part of that, to ground and to resource.
Absolutely.
And now that we're grounded and resourced, I want to take a step back. How old are you, James?
I am 62.
62 years young.
Yep. I want to live to 111, by the way. At my 60th birthday, I had a vision of living to 111 because I like ones. I like triple ones.
Let's go.
So 111. The interesting thing about that.
Till 1:11 in the afternoon?
No. Till 111 years old.
No, I mean,
yeah,
on your 111th birthday at
111. Exactly, or at 11:11. I joke.
You'll kick that bucket, boy.
I'll wave goodbye to everyone. But it's like, what has that done for me? It's an interesting thing to talk about that on the adult ADD spectrum, because it's given me a little toehold that has changed how I exercise. It's not like. And I joke about it, but the reality is,
111.
Yeah, it gives me.
You got a goal.
I think yes, and it's not like
have folks done that. Has someone lived to 111?
Oh yeah, we've probably the oldest person on the planet is probably in the probably close to 120.
No way. That's true.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I know we have centenarians, but
I don't know if it's in this society. I know there are societies.
You might have to move to Greece. Those blue zones. They talk about those blue zones.
No, the blue. Right? You can create the blue zone in your own body.
We're gonna create it.
You don't have to go to Greece.
We're just gonna have to go to James's house.
If you can't handle the stress around you, you gotta live within the chaos that's around you.
Yeah. Okay, so where were you born? We're gonna do a little bit backstory.
Born in Houston, Texas.
For James.
Yeah.
Born in Houston, Texas. And what was your family dynamic like?
Crazy. Absolutely chaotic. I was born to Alfred Anthony Ochoa and Juanita Maria Ochoa.
Is this a Mexican descent, Hispanic descent?
Spanish descent.
Spanish.
But my grandmother was from Mexico, so we have Mexican descent. She was from Saltillo, Mexico on my father's side. My mother was French and German.
Oh, wow.
Her last name was Kane. Kane is one of the original founding names of the founding fathers.
Really?
Of the United States, as I've discovered. But it's also got that's one of the ADD thread comes through. It comes through the Kane family.
Canes gave it to you. You got hit with that ADHD.
I did. But I'm telling you, so my parents, my mother was 28. My dad was 30 when they got married.
What was life like for them? And when were you born? How much longer after that?
So they were born in 1952.
Okay.
They had their first 7 children in 8 years.
Whoa, you're one of 7?
One of 8.
Oh my God. I don't think you have 8 kids and keep sanity.
No.
Y'all, that just doesn't happen.
No, and we had I was in
8 kids?
In an 1,100 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house with 3
Oh my
dogs.
God. 3 dogs?
It was chaos. We had 3 bunk beds in one room. We had a set of bunk beds, and then in the second room, my parents had the third room. We didn't move to a bigger house until I was about 11 years old. But it was this abject chaos. So I was the 7th out of 8, and 6 of those first 7 were boys. There's only 1 girl.
Oh my God, that poor girl.
She's
poor
phenomenal.
child.
My sister Mary Alice is incredible. She is a
God
saint.
bless her.
No kidding. She's 18 months older than me.
Yeah.
So what I theorize now is that I actually got more attachment needs met in that chaotic environment because I was her little baby doll. She had someone to play with.
She was after you or before you?
She was after. She was before me.
Okay.
So she was 18 months older than me.
Oh, right. 18
We're
months
incredibly close as brother and sister now, and adult. She's up in Seattle, and she's a reading expert and disability or dyslexia expert.
She took care of you.
She did.
She was the buffer between you and those other.
Now, this was back in the 50s, so we had my grandmother lived within 4 or 5 blocks. I had 2 or 3 aunts and uncles. We had older cousins coming over and taking care of us.
Okay, it was a community.
Right.
What part of Houston?
In South Houston, out off of McCalla and Wayside, off of 610.
Okay.
It was and we went to, we were devout. My parents were devout Catholics, so we went to Catholic school our entire schooling. And my oldest brother was valedictorian of the high school. My youngest brother was valedictorian of the high school. Both of them are brilliant. I never thought I was smart until a psychologist told me I was in my mid-40s.
That's similar to me when I got my psychological evaluation, and it said, these superior and genius levels. I was like, I'm smart. I had such a vision of myself as a dunce, a bad kid, all of those things. It's starting to come into perspective now what you said earlier about, another Ochoa kiddo.
Right,
There's
right.
8 of them.
Exactly. Oh, they knew him. They knew us well. And
what'd your dad do for a living?
my dad is it. My dad's so near and dear to me. He's passed on. He died in 2010 at 88.
Oh my goodness.
So my dad was in the construction industry, in the administrative area. He was, I would knew him as a timekeeper or someone who took care of those type of things. But my father was intriguing in that, in today's world, he would have made an incredible executive secretary. He could type 125 words a minute.
Oh my God.
He knew Spanish. He knew Castilian Spanish. It was his first language. He failed first grade because he didn't know English.
Oh my goodness.
The tragedy to our family is that in the 50s, being Hispanic was also almost as much as being black at that time. And so my mother, as I understood, forbid my father from teaching any of his children Spanish.
So racism's a part of the story.
So none of the 8 children, none of the Ochoas
speak Castilian Spanish.
They don't speak Spanish.
Castilian, is that up there by Barcelona? Is that where that is?
It's more of a formal type of the Spanish language.
Your dad was working in construction and more of the administrative side.
More the administrative side. He worked 2 or 3 jobs his entire life.
So he's a hard worker, breadwinner.
Always breadwinner. Worked. My mom stayed at home. My mom was brilliant.
Stay-at-home mom?
Stay-at-home mom. I don't know that she could have done any other thing at that point in the 50s. But my mother... Yeah. My mother was an executive secretary before she married my father. She owned 2 cars. She was totally independent.
No way. Back then?
In the early 50s, she gave one of her cars to her siblings to take to college.
Go mom.
She was the oldest of 5 children. But my mother was either going to go into the nunnery or she was never going to get married.
She did the opposite of going into the nunnery.
Well, she met my father, who had been engaged twice, 2 failed engagements, met my mother. Their mothers had met in a Bible study in church. My parents grew up 2 to 3 blocks from each other, never met each other their entire life. They were set up by their mothers. 3 months later, they were married. And 11 months later, they had their first kid.
I have this. I don't know if this maps at all to your mom and dad, but this Willie Nelson song comes to mind. She's a good-hearted woman in love with a good time and man.
Yes.
Was that your dad?
Yes. My dad was a talker. My dad was a storyteller.
Yeah.
Gregarious
man.
You know, I could tell you that I always was challenged by my father's lack of career success and lack of financial success.
Right.
We were very impoverished growing up, hard to make ends meet, getting help from family members and other kinds of things throughout our childhood. We always had enough, but we just always felt impoverished. We all threw paper routes for 5 years together.
Really?
That's a whole other story of the world.
I'm surprised the Ochoa family didn't just handle all the papers in Houston back then. Goodness.
So, but my father, I was 50 when my father passed away, and I was on a mountain in Seattle, Mount Rainier. I was attempting to think I was going to climb it. I had way too much anxiety to climb a mountain. So I was on this mountainside when my father passed away, and my father came to me in what I felt was a very clear presence. I was sleeping in a tent alone, and someone shook me awake, and there was no one in my tent.
Oh my God.
And I knew my father was leaving. And my father endowed me with 3 lessons, which I've written a blog about before, that I always thought my dad had missed life because he didn't have a successful career and he didn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, you missed it. Life is about 3 things. It's about deep, loving relationships, telling stories, and having fun. And he had PhDs in every freaking one of those. Yeah. My dad was a storyteller like no one's business.
Yeah.
Now, I also think my dad had some significant neurodivergencies that were on the schizophrenic spectrum to certain degrees. He had certain paranoias and other things in his life that were unbridled, but he had a deep spiritual sense to himself. And he was an incredible father. They had 8 kids, 17 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren before they passed us. The endowment was us. My mother wrote us a Christmas letter in 2005, I think it was, that my sister still reads every Christmas about how what they gave us was each other.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful, beautiful letter.
Oh, wow.
So if I don't know, that's a God-centered story. I don't know what you want to call it, but both of my parents were O negative. That's a very rare blood type. They did not have their blood tested, and as I understood, in the early 50s, and they were both O negative.
Yeah.
And so I give blood now because it's a universal blood supply. But, you know, I grew up in a very storied, chaotic, self-surviving, very spiritually endowed family in Catholicism. And I didn't know this till my mother was in her 80s. She said 4 to 5 rosaries a day. My mother would rub her rosary beads.
Meditation.
So much. She would break them.
Wow.
And we didn't discover this until the 80s. My brother is a deacon in the Catholic Church, and he would fix her rosaries for her. He's like, how do you break your rosaries, Mom? She's like, well, I'm just
Use
pressing
them
on
all
them.
day. Yeah, all day. That was fidgets. She had a fidget.
She had a fidget. I never thought about it like that, Phil. That's very true. She had a fidget.
When I meet with folks, I ask them about the cycle of violence, discipline, and the household when they're growing up. And I'm wondering, because I read this longitudinal study about maltreatment and ADHD. And so I wonder what discipline was like in your household. Do you feel like there was a cycle of violence there between your mom and your dad? And I know this might be a hard question to answer.
Really
and you don't
hard.
have to.
It's not really hard because I believe in clarifying your life. I have a whole other philosophy around your entire life history is your most valuable resource for experience, strength, wisdom, knowledge, and hope. Okay, you could scan it and read it like a rich storybook. You don't want to shy away from what happened in your life. You want to know how it made you who you are today. So if I look at my parents and I look at discipline and those kind of things, I understand now they were absolutely doing the best they could with what they had.
Yeah.
Okay. They were overwhelmed. They were stressed to the max.
Yeah.
They had way too many children, just in the sense of being able to care for them. Okay. And so it was just
Financial struggles. Yeah.
So my mother was very unbridled in her overwhelm and her temper, and I can understand it now.
Yeah.
With so much going on around them all the time.
How did it express itself in the household?
Generally in fights or arguments or
Escalating techniques.
Escalating, absolutely. And my brothers and I were into heavy competition with each other. For years, this is the kind of the epitome of it. All right, is that my brothers and I would do things like throw things at each other, and all you would hear was "think fast," and you knew something was coming at you.
Oh my God!
Keys, baseball, something was not. It was kind of. So I'm very quick with my reflexes.
Oh, man.
All you got to do is say "think fast," and I'm looking to grab something. And I am a great catcher. I can put balls behind my back and catch them. And I'm like, and so after clarifying all this as an adult and looking back at the chaos I grew up in and the challenges and the impoverishment and all these other pieces, we had so many rituals and routines, and we have pictures of all of us dressed, ready to go to church. I'm just like, how did they do this? So through it all, there was a deep spirituality.
Did your mom and dad kind of fight each other too? Was there like a
out
lot
of
of
overwhelm
escalation?
again?
Yeah.
But it was never it was more from how are we going to make ends meet? Oh my God, what's going to happen now? You know?
Yeah.
It was my dad getting a second or third job to make ends meet. He did what he had to do.
Yeah.
He'd work at 7-Elevens. He'd work in,
Doing whatever he had
gas
to do
stations.
to support
to
that
make
family.
ends meet.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because if I look at attachment theory and how I stayed connected in my family, I now know as I look back through this, I was cooking with my mother in the kitchen at 4 years old. Now I know that's how I got to spend time with my mother.
Cooking.
Go to the kitchen. Cook with your mom. I had this enormously deep, connected relationship with my mom throughout my life. And with my father, I would remember getting up at 9:30, 10:30 when he would come home. I'd hear him. I'd get up. I'd go wander in the kitchen, and we would sit and talk as he made dinner or made what we would call migas, which was, for him, was anything in the refrigerator he could throw together and throw eggs on the top of.
Yeah.
He'd call it migas. But I remember getting up with my dad and spending time with him.
When he got home in the evening.
Right, 10:30 at night. I'd get up out of bed and I'd go spend time with him. That's how I got attached with my parents, and I maintained a sense of health. I know it now.
Yeah.
But in clarifying just the spiritual love that they had. So
I want to, first and foremost, I want to give my parents and your parents all of the grace, knowing that they were of their time, and they were doing the best that they can. But some way of looking back at it to tell a story and to understand more. I would think that growing up in that household, you had have a knee-jerk type of reactivity to things when they happen.
Absolutely, all the time.
Yeah.
And that reactivity ensued chaos and fighting and sibling rivalry and all kind of things.
Yeah.
But we always helped the family. Like I said, we threw paper routes together. I was working at I worked for Baskin Robbins for 5 years, from 13 to 18. Okay, I don't think you're supposed to work at 13. Okay, but I worked at 13.
Baskin Robbins.
And John Bogue, who was a guy, may he rest in peace, he was an Irish immigrant who married a woman 20 years younger than him and had 2 daughters, and bought a Baskin Robbins with all his savings off the railroad that he was working on. And,
he wanted that ice cream, boy.
And he had one of the top Baskin Robbins in the state.
Well, just serving ice cream to the Ochoa family, probably.
Right. But I learned more. I was an employee of the quarter, during Baskin Robbins. I still got a Baskin Robbins, but it just taught me work ethic.
Yeah.
Okay. He was a real mentor and another co-parent.
Outside of the house, you had another
Absolutely.
chief.
Absolutely.
Mentor teaching you stuff.
You know.
What was discipline like? Was your dad the disciplinarian? Was your mom? Was it both?
I think both of them were, and both of them, again, were overactivated at times, which certainly led to harm and abuse. And
was that spankings?
challenges.
Would they
spankings
spank
and whippings and those kind of things? They didn't know what else. I mean, that was the favor
Yeah.
of the day.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I was talking to my friends the other day, and I told them a story of when I was in elementary school in Mississippi, and the principal called my dad up to ask him if he could spank me. And I think that might have been the first year they actually made a phone call.
Right.
You know? So spankings,
Oh, yeah, the
all
paddle.
that stuff was just...
The paddle in high school.
Yeah, they would have it. The principal had it on the wall. He would pick down this
Oh, yeah.
paddle, and it was just that
yeah.
was their technique.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, there were several abusive techniques coming out of the Catholic school, unfortunately.
My grandmother used to have me go out and find a stick.
Oh, yeah.
And if I found one that was too small, she would go find this stick. So there was this evaluation of which of these sticks is big enough for me
Which is going to harm
accept, and which of them is going
Right.
to leave the smallest
It was
wound.
crazy what
And
we
I don't
grew
know
up
that
in.
she actually hit me with the stick too many times, but that story sticks in my head.
What we grew up with. But here we are.
Here we are. Oh, man. So corporal punishment was a part of your childhood.
Sure. I think it was a part of many people's childhood.
And I imagine
unfortunately,
it
in the
wasn't a
50s.
part of your children's childhood, was it?
No, it was not. It was something that wasn't tolerated or accepted, in our family at all. And thankfully, my wife did not grow up in that kind of environment.
Yeah. So your wife didn't grow up in that cycle of violence.
No, she did not. She grew up with chaos and challenges at times, but it was more, relationship between child and parent. It was not, chaos or overwhelm. So those are good things.
I think a lot about stopping the cycle of violence for me with my kids. When did you ever conceptualize your experience as a child as being a part of a cycle of violence? Did you ever think I need to end this here and do something different for my kids? And if so, how did you find role models for something different?
Well, I mean, one of the interesting stories I tell when in working with in ADHD treatment early on is I was co-facilitating or I was assisting a psychologist who was doing an ADHD parenting class. And I would assist him, and I would leave that parenting class and I would go to my own parenting class. So, I found a redirecting children's behavior, RCB parenting classes, which are still out there. It's a great relational parenting class, but that only came out of challenge of my own anger and challenge with my own children one or two times. And it was, thankfully, my wife is, very clear about these things. We don't use we don't use discipline in physical ways. It just doesn't work. So for me, it was going into my own parenting classes and going to get help, going to get counseling.
You were doing your own work.
Absolutely. How can you not do your own work? I tell parents, work on yourself 70% of the time, provide an environment the other 30% for your child safely to grow up in. Get out of their way. They're not you.
Yeah.
It's just the basics.
Work on yourself. Create that environment.
Right.
I think of that saying. What is that saying? People do the best they can, and when they learn better, they do better.
Right.
They do the best they can, and when they find resources and so you're constantly harvesting, constantly sourcing, resourcing better ways to move forward.
Right.
And you did that. You were taking, what was the name of the relational model for kids?
It was a redirecting children's behavior.
And they still have that type
RCB.
of thing?
Yeah, it's a relational model that teaches parents about how to have a relationship with their children. It's funny. We did one of their models is family meetings, where you sit down and have meetings with your children with an agenda. And as the children get older, they can lead the meeting. They can take notes for the meeting. Well, we still have a journal of notes, from some of our family meetings when our kids were, 6, 7, 8 years old. And, It's Dad's got to chew with his mouth closed. Dad, stop interrupting the kids. It's like all these hyperactive ADD behaviors in there. They're really funny. They're precious. I had to keep them when we found them.
Oh my God.
They're really funny.
Y'all did those.
Oh yeah, we did family meetings, and they were critical, and we still do family meetings. My boys are 28 and 32, and there'll be times it's couch time. It's just where we talk with each other, heart to heart, about how are you doing in life.
I think about, I've read through a lot of books, whether it's Alfie Cohen's, Unconditional Parenting or Punish by Reward, or the person that I think of when I hear this model is How to Speak So Kids Listen and Listen So Kids Speak, and having that relationship and having that language that opens them up. And, I still, this morning, am in a place where I struggle with this. This morning, I was talking to my daughter Emerson and saying, share with me what's going on for you so that I can work with you to make it better. And, I hear her say, you don't ever listen, things like that. And it's difficult for me to understand, is that the voice of a 15-year-old, every 15-year-old struggle of I'm not heard? Yeah. Or is that the voice of, someone that is meeting a dad that's not sufficient, not, properly parenting? It's hard for me to tease, or if it's just she's a young lady and there's also hormonal things that are going on there. I'm dog whistle PMS type of thing, and I don't think that's necessarily all of it, but that plays a role. All of these chemical puberty plays a role in their
as a parent. You've got to stay in front of it.
Yeah,
you have to stay in front of communication and relationship with your children, and the authenticity to parenting to me is you have to role model how to take care of yourself. Okay. Children are born, right? We're all born with two inbred or inborn skill sets: feeling and observation. We learn language, we learn belief, we learn all these other rules and behaviors of how to interact with each other, but your children are watching you. And so because your children are watching you, you have to understand they're watching you on how to become an adult. Those are the tapes being recorded.
Oh, there's a beautiful quote that comes to mind. Our children are watching us grow up.
Yes.
Too.
Exactly. And if you don't respect that, so one of the most effective things I think parents can do is to take their own time out. Because when you have overactivated parents and overactivated children, that's where harm ensues.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. It's what happens. And so you really have to understand that if you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of your children? And so the constancy of your own self-care is critical to be a good, healthy parent.
And it sounds like not only for your own regulation, but also for them to witness that,
Certainly.
To model that.
Absolutely. One of the other big things is I will tell parents, certainly as their children get into adolescence, is you are not your child's most important figure in their life. They're trying to develop away from you to be their independent sense of self. You got to get that maturity wise as a parent. You want to support them. I'm a huge guy around passion projects and mentors, and I set up both of my children with mentors and people to learn from. My wife did that. Our oldest son is in computer networking. He's a computer engineer. He's a mechanical engineer out of Georgia Tech. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I hired some guy who was doing computer work for me when he was 12 years old. They went to Goodwill and got a computer and took it apart. He made a whole list of what he needed to buy and build his own computer.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and my youngest son, we found him someone who was a musician. My son was playing trumpet, was a jazz player. And, I bought my youngest son and his jazz teacher 2 tickets to Wynton Marsalis at the Paramount.
Oh,
I didn't go.
Oh, my goodness.
Because it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
You got to get out of the way and help your kids be themselves in a way that's going to be most effective to them. Otherwise, how could they develop?
I think of Murray Bowman's self-differentiation, those type of
Absolutely.
ideas. And then like you're what I'm hearing you say is support your children's self-differentiation by
Absolutely.
allowing them to have other adults
Yes.
mentor and grow them
Yes.
and give them
Yes. So
insight.
Here's a brief story. My son, oldest son, was in robotics in high school. And so robotics in high school, they had a team of 47 people. Okay. They took pilgrimages is what I call them now. I slept on a sleeper bus from here to Atlanta in an overnight bus trip twice for 2 years on my son's robotics team. My son, when he was a senior, they were in the nationals of FIRST Robotics in Atlanta in the Superdome. I'm sitting there with another parent as my son comes into the aisle and walks past me. He might have said hi to me. I can't remember. But he made a beeline for Danny, who was a mentor engineer on the team, who was probably in his early 30s. He much more wanted to sit next to Danny to watch the robotics final. It certainly made sense to me, but it was just so telling to see my son walk past me and go and sit next to another adult male.
Did it hurt?
Absolutely, to some degree.
Yeah.
But it was just more of it was a disenchanted kind of, it's like, what? And I'm like, but that needs to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I look back on it now. It's the most effective. But if you don't understand that as a parent,
I would feel devastated, James.
you get in the way.
Oh, I would feel devastated. I could almost put myself there and be like, why? Right. I want to spend time with my kids.
Well, sure you do. But the reality is you have to let them spend time with themselves, and that time will come back.
Yeah.
You know, I always say the ugly secret for all of us growing up is, right, we don't want to be like our parents. And then by the time we get to 30 and we look back, we go, oh, I'm just like my parents. Because it's just genetics. It's just genetics, you know. We always joke in my family now, like different characteristics of my father and who has it, you know. The storytelling, the hyperactivity, the having fun. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's fun.
What characteristics you think you have of your dad? Obviously the storytelling. I think that's strong.
So here's a funny story about the use of imagination in adult ADD. So when I began to think about the use of imagination or internal resourcing for adults with ADD by using their mind and creating this emotional safe place and creating a mental support group of people you could visualize supporting you, whether they're past grandparents or teachers or whomever, I have a hyper ability to imagine things in my mind to an nth degree. So I have an emotional safe place in my mind that is a vast empire. It's one of my many resources now, but it's been there since 1986 or so when I did a self-help seminar that helped us to build an emotional safe place. It's a common psychological technique or idea. It's nothing big about it, but I realized that my ability to imagine and visualize things in my mind's eye, I think, is similarly on a neurodivergent spectrum that at the far end could be disordered in the sense of schizophrenia. So if you think about schizophrenia in a sense of hallucinations and imagination and seeing things, I've done genetic testing, and I think I've got 1 out of the 3 genes needed, to develop schizophrenia.
Oh.
I just know I have a wicked imagination, and so I use that visualization ability to help my clients and myself build this internal imaginary state. Well, it becomes one of the pillars of my practice and techniques.
Yeah.
And my father was always telling stories and always imagining things and always, he was a photographer before he got married, and we found 8 photograph albums that were professionally done with a white pencil and all these other things. We didn't see him till he was 80 years old.
What?
And my dad traveled and took all these pictures, and it's like I still own those photograph books, and it's like, he had a huge collection of symphony records. He was a huge symphony guy. He would win baseball tickets all the time because he knew the symphony that was being played on, the symphony station in Houston. So how am I like my dad? I'm gregarious. I love people. I love living life on life's terms deeply. And I can deal with the details of life. I like enjoying the adventure.
Yeah.
and just playing with it.
Okay, things that come to mind, I'd love to talk to you. I'd like to talk about this book. I want to talk to your new book, and I also want to talk about how spirituality plays a role in your practice and in your life.
Right.
And something that came up that I think is topical now with kind of the reemergence or the reinvestigation or some kind of demystization of psychedelics playing a role in psychology. And I wondered if you had any experience of that in your life, just because it's topical. Folks would want to understand about it.
Right.
Where do you want to start? I'd love to talk about all those. Is any of them compelling to you?
Well, I think we start, probably with the book process and kind of where those are going. That, Focus Forward, Navigating the Storms of Adult ADHD, which was written in 2016, was really the first 25 years of my work in the field. This was written with a writing coach and editor, Robin Schatzenoff, who was instrumental in the book, to the point that she's going to have a byline of co-authorship in my second book.
Oh,
because of her ability to really conceptualize what I'm talking about and bring a voice to it in a way that's so relatable and so meaningful. And Robin and I are working on my second book. But this first book, Focus Forward, was a storytelling venture of really, what do adults with ADHD need to know about the mental and emotional stress? Because the mental and emotional stress of adult ADHD is the part that would never go away. This is what ended those two long-term groups that I had in the adult ADD spectrum before I began to understand how to treat it differently. And so that emotional and mental stress, I coined the term emotional distress syndrome, or the EDS of ADHD. The emotional distress syndrome of ADHD is all the neurological and behavioral distress or disruption that spins off of the neurology and the diagnosis. If you don't treat it, it will treat you. Okay.
Yeah.
It creates a level of distress that is akin to a low grade or even a full blown post-traumatic stress disorder. Because if you've failed thousands of times in your life, you didn't know why, then you're going to wind up with post-traumatic stress because of the reactivity of that history. Yeah. And so in writing the book, the storyteller writing the book on how it came to be, I had what I thought were 10, 11, 12 chapters that I came to Robin with. And the beauty of who Robin is she was an investigative journalist at one point in her life. She's also written 4 or 5 books. One of them about gardeners, called Dirty Hands. It was a very successful book. But Robin, in her investigative journalistic way, essentially interviewed me over about 9 or 10 months to get the story of how ADHD and how my treatment philosophies and the things came about.
Yeah.
And then help put that story together in a way that's relatable, that immediately people can see it. And it's going to be the same with the second book. But how these books, so my second book is called When the Shiny Wears Off.
When the Shiny Wears Off.
Navigating.
Can you explain the shiny?
So, yeah,
the shiny comes in here, right?
Shiny does come in here to some degree in Focus Forward.
What is the shiny?
So the shiny for us with adults or with ADHD is the attractiveness we feel to things naturally, pulls us toward it, whether it's from distraction or it's from an impassioned sense of interest that something's grabbed my attention and it's pulled me in.
Yeah.
It could be part of a hyper focus or something I'm super interested in. And so if you look at that idea of shininess, us with ADHD, typically it's seen as something that's difficult or a problem. Because shininess typically is seen from it's disruptive to your life. You're never going to follow through with it. What are you doing with this? It doesn't look rational to other people. It's not on a linear spectrum.
Yeah.
And so that shininess is something we gravitate or go after. Well, to me now, I understand the shininess has so much to do with the natural ability for us to be stimulated or to see things or to feel intrigued by things. So the piece for me, which makes so much sense as a clinician now for 35 years in treating ADHD, it's the shininess of ADHD that's kept me caught. Everyone who comes in has a different story that has a lot of similarity to it,
Yeah.
but the subtleties are different.
Different enough to be new, so it's not because
Right.
with the shiny thing, you kind of go from one to the next to the next.
Correct.
But it seems like each person or each scenario was
Right.
shiny,
Right.
and it all had this overarch or this
Yep.
this combining characteristic of a neurodivergence or ADHD.
Right. Right. And so with that, you get this shininess that goes on that pulls you toward things. Well, you want to learn to functionalize that.
Mm-hmm.
You want to learn to be able to have it in your life in a meaningful way. So this is where the second book of When the Shiny Wears Off, what do you do when you get bored, when things are inconsistent? What do you do when it's no longer easy anymore? I know as much as I need to know about ADHD, and my life is still hard at times. That's the ongoing nature of the emotional distress syndrome that is like weather patterns in us in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So these weather patterns come and go. So if you got a storm brewing in, yeah, it's important to tie down things outside. It's important to put your raincoat on. You got to resource yourself.
Mm-hmm.
These storms don't go away, and they're much more disruptive for us with ADHD. So navigating the lifetime storms of adult ADHD, which is what When the Shiny Wears Off, the second book is about, is what do I do with my disruptive life patterns that don't go away, that keep cycling themselves at a point where I'm just exhausted, where intervention fatigue comes in, where I just don't know what to do anymore. And this book has been as challenging as the first one was to write. Something funny tragically in some ways, but we understood it and we're moving through it. Rob and I were writing over the summer for 3 or 4 months. We were writing about the storms. When we first started looking at the variety of storms in the adult ADD spectrum, oh my God, Phil, we had over 80 storms.
Oh.
Okay. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay. We had gotten them down to like 10 or 11 or 12 kind of in grouped, those kind of things. But every time we would talk about them, I would have this nauseous feeling because they're real.
Yeah.
When you look at these, this is what happens to me.
It's real.
So we got lost writing in the storms. We got lost in our own storms writing about the storms of adult ADD. It was hilarious. We were stuck. We were like,
A snake eating its own tail.
so we realized that, we're in the part of the book now. We're talking more about resource and kind of where the concept is going. But, Robin's really structuring the book in a way that's meaningful. And I really trust her intimately with that. She was really the architect in so many ways of Focus Forward in that way. And I provided certainly the experience and the expertise and all the ideas and the concepts and things, but the way they come across. So Focus Forward, and I'm certain that When the Shiny Wears Off will be the same. There's a piecemeal book. You can pick it up, open it up, and read a piece of it and get something from it anywhere, anytime. So it's a very story-driven book that has a lot of concepts in it. And the fascinating part to me, Phil, is that this is a self-published book. Nobody would ever know it. I started my own press company called Empowering Minds Press to publish it because I wanted to keep the intellectual property. It has a life of its own now. I still sell between 75 to 150 books a month.
Really?
And I don't advertise the book.
You're a publisher.
Yes. I published my own book. So the reality is,
Wow.
and I had a consultant who helped put all the structure together of the book. But the book has a life of its own, so people understand it. People get resonance from it. I've had stories from people all over the world who are like, it's speaking to them in a way that other books haven't because it addresses one of the most ugly, difficult topics to me, is emotional and mental stress of someone's pain and suffering. It's not like an organizational strategy or medication or other things that can just take you away or to help to stabilize. No, we're talking about the muck and the mire all the time.
One thing that came to me as you mentioned this was a time when I read a book that made sense to me. I felt like I wasn't alone, and that was Carolyn McGuire's book, Why Won't Anybody Play With Me? And that really speaks to what you're talking about.
Yes.
This lifetime of not being asked to birthday parties, not
Right.
being included, kicked out of groups, just
Right.
not being able to stay in a job and
Right.
not understanding what's going on. I want desperately to do these
Exactly.
things. I go to workshop after workshop. I work on myself. I do inner work.
Right.
And yet I'm still experiencing this like consistent isolation
Right.
and that has an impact on the human psyche, the
Sure.
human spirit,
Well,
which is what kind of you're
Right,
talking
but
about.
you get into radical acceptance
Yeah.
and radical forgiveness and radical compassion.
Oh, you have to. Kristen Neff's
You don't
work,
have to.
That Kristen's Neff work, that
You don't have to.
self-compassion.
Many people implode and
Yeah.
explode. If you want to go look at some of the most disruptive research on adult ADD, go look at Russell Barkley's research on the effect of longevity of lifespan for adults with ADD. It's the most horrific piece of research done in about 2018. I don't think many people want to see it.
What,
And
they
it was
don't
a-
live as long? No, we don't have to get into that.
No, by 11 to 13 years.
Yeah.
There are 9 factors on the adult ADD spectrum. 7 of them are manageable. Addiction, relationship, temper, all these other.
Yeah.
2 pieces of hyperactivity, impulsivity aren't well managed in adults with ADD, and they continue to run a very high risk factor. I being one of those, you really have to keep your eyes on that stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's nothing in the medical sciences that's going to take that kind of lifespan off of an adult's life. It's so hard for government entities or anyone else to even think about.
Yeah.
They're like, this is insane. This can't be right. Well, this was a meta-analysis of thousands of studies, well done by Russell Barkley,
Yeah.
definitely the top neuroscientist in the field. And it's tragic because we still only think maybe 20% at best even know they have this neurodivergency. Many of them live with it as a character defect or as a characteristic or a disruption that I just have to get used to.
Yeah. I have this thought. We'll have some years taken off our life, but I think my impulsivity and my hyperactivity has made me a wonderful adventurer.
Well, sure,
a
it is.
wonderful, that fools rush in where angels fear to tread, and I have rushed in so many times,
Yep.
and I don't know that I would take back those.
No, and I don't think I
failures.
would either, but I do think that you change your lifespan when you educate yourself about this,
Oh yeah,
and you begin to thrive when you educate yourself and understand. And so, one of my mainstays right now is I've gone through 4 seasons of what I call ADHD Town Hall. And ADHD Town Hall is 2 6-week webinars in the fall and the spring. And it's me for an hour on a webinar, opening a topic of about 10 minutes and then doing interactive Q&A for an hour with people on a webinar. That'll never go away. It becomes to build a community of people with ADD. I call it touchstone coaching, in that you come back and touch the stone of ADD in a way that you just review a lot of what you know or looking at certain strategies. And so I use the same 6 topics every time because it's those 6 areas that are most disruptive.
yeah,
Whether it's the emotional stress or how to do mindfulness, organization, how you're going to affect others, how to chase shiny objects meaningfully, and how to set up things in your life
Those
from
are
a
the 6
resourcing
topics.
point of view. Absolutely. And, all that's on my website, but I'll be doing Town Hall again starting in March at some point for 6
Yeah.
weeks. And it's not expensive. It's one of the things I've really gotten out there because as an expert in my field, certainly, the way I've set up my practice, and not everyone can get to me. Not everyone can afford me. I get it.
right.
I've got a podcast called The Complex.
It's a great podcast,
Yeah,
by the way,
thank
with your
you.
son, right?
Yes, my son
watched
produced
that
it.
thing, yeah.
Yes, my son produced it.
It's a great podcast.
It's a radio narrative fiction theater of 2 seasons now where you learn everyone living in this apartment complex in Austin, Texas has a different form of adult ADD. And we have afterthoughts after we have an episode.
Yeah.
Teach people about it. It's and I do think there'll be a season 3 at some point as we get the second book written. But I'm a single person again. I don't have a big organization. I have a 15-hour assistant who works with me.
Yeah.
So I think it's a miracle that I've done as much as I've done with what I continue to do. And I think everything has to do with why. Because I have ADHD, and I have a hyperdrive, and I have a vision that is so far beyond me.
Yeah.
That it keeps carrying me, Phil. And it's like, I've talked at big conferences and those kind of things. I could do that. That's not my, I want people to understand what it is for them in, brass tacks, in real terms on a daily basis. How are you going to take care of yourself? Are you going to take care of your family?
Yeah.
How are you going to keep yourself sane? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. When's the book coming out?
Good question.
Y'all are writing it now. You're in the
we're both ADD.
You're in the woodshed now with Robin and Robin's ADD too, ADHD.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, it's the blind leading the blind over there.
Yes, but sometimes the seeing eye dog shows up, so we don't bump into things as often. That's my term for it. But no, the reality is I'm thinking probably the spring of 25. Fall of 25, if I was to guess at it. The first book took me 4 years to write.
Yeah.
And so we are 18 months into this one.
Are you having a good time doing it?
I'm having a blast doing it. It's another storied adventure. I go to a place, Robin and her adult ADHD has created a place that she lives over in East Austin called The Compound that's got about 5 houses on about an acre and a half. She's created all of them. And different people.
Are they tiny homes or what?
No, they're full houses that people live in. So it's kind of a condoized kind of a space, but it's like this.
Is that a commune? What's the deal with this place?
They live in the main house. They have other people who use an architect is in an office building. Of one of them is just done. They were just in an architectural magazine because the architect had all these other architects there, and they're like, "This is phenomenal."
Oh wow!
And so there's just these creative, environmental, resource, sustainable resource houses.
I should maybe meet Robin.
Oh my God, Robin's she's just a hoot, and she loves what she does. But that's where I'm writing the book, at the Compound, and I'll be seeing her tomorrow there for continued writing to kind of see what's next, and the book will get produced. It's so there's no longer the waiting for the shoe to drop, but there's sometimes that sensation that, sometimes I have this old fear that if I talk about something too much, something's going to happen to it. Something's going to go wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I've just got to throw that crap to the wind because the book's already got a name. I don't know if I've ever had a book that's got a name. And Focus Forward's name came in such unusual, weird, strange ways that, Robin actually came up with When the Shiny Wears Off. And I came up with the second half of Navigating the Lifetime Storms.
Nice. Okay. We've gone through the book that you wrote, your first book, Focus Forward, Navigating the Storms of Adult ADHD. We talked about the next book coming out, which is going to be, remind me the name again. You just said it, but working memory.
When the Shiny Wears Off.
When the Shiny Wears Off.
Navigating the Lifetime Storms of Adult ADHD. I think it'll be out in the fall of probably 25 is my guess. Yeah, a couple years.
What role does spirituality play or right? So the question is, you've looked to psychology, you've looked to science for a lot of your practice and a lot of your techniques, but I get a strong sense of mysticism and spirituality.
Absolutely.
I get a strong sense of that from you.
I couldn't live without it.
And I'd love for you to talk about it a little bit.
Well, we have to go back to 4 years old.
Oh my God.
So I had a closed head injury when I was 4 years old. I fell off a non-moving car playing with my sister, hit my head. I always thought I hit it on concrete. My older brother told me, no, you hit it on the grass. So I didn't learn that till years later. But I started to have severe headaches. My father was actually in Vietnam building Air Force bases with his construction company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the hospital for 8 weeks with blood leaking. They only knew that because they had to give me spinal taps every 2 weeks.
Oh, my
God. That's not a lot of fun at 4 years old.
Oh, my God.
The worst nurse I ever had was the one who said, if you stop crying, I'll let your mother come in. I'm like, you put a needle there and tell me how you're going to stop crying. So those were painful times. But my dad came back from Vietnam to visit me when he heard. And he walked into my hospital room, and I write about this in Focus Forward that I had what I remembered was a blue orb floating above my bed, a blue, shiny and kind of the blue at the bottom of my book, Focus Forward. And I looked at my dad and I said, I'm not going to die, Dad. I'm here for a reason. That's a 4-year-old. I don't necessarily remember. My dad remembers that. It was a family folklore kind of a space. My mother had every Catholic mass in the city of Houston praying for me at 8 o'clock every morning. And within about 8 weeks, this is 1965, so they're getting shadows of, I don't know what kind of, but I had a sub-hemorrhage brain. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the names of what it was, but it stopped. After 8 weeks, the blood, I stopped having those headaches. And I went and stayed at my grandmother's for a while. But it was my first spiritual experience. So I was considered in some ways a miracle baby. And miracle babies have their own responsibility issues, because then it's like, what are you going to do in life? Mm-hmm. The reality is, this is what I'm here to do.
You had an early near-death experience.
Yes, I did. I had an early NDE. And so when I look at spirituality, and you asked me about spirituality, I was raised Roman Catholic. I shunned Catholicism. When I was 18, I questioned so many things. I got kicked out of religious school, sent to the principal's office. None of it made sense to me because I couldn't question things. I got sober when I was 26 years old. I used drugs and alcohol to significant degrees. I used methamphetamine to significant degrees. What I understood now is I was treating my ADHD and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But I overused it.
Yeah, speed is a common
it is.
medication for ADHD.
It is.
And you were self-medicating.
Yes. And so street speed is very different than methamphetamines or pharmaceutical, and medication is good. I still take adult ADHD medication on an ongoing basis.
What are you taking?
I'm taking Vyvanse, and I'm taking 20 milligrams, and I took Concerta before that. I didn't take medication for my ADHD diagnosis for probably the first 20 years of my diagnosis. And so how did I handle it? Well, with a lot of caffeine, a lot of energy drinks, and a lot of adrenaline. Wasn't very, it was what I was concerned that I was always reactivate my addiction. Well, my addiction as it is an ongoing space of recovery.
Yeah.
It's part of me being off of sugar and carbs and refined sugars and caffeine.
Yeah.
Because it was just too addictive for me. So, if I talk about spirituality, I define spirituality as what brings personal meaning to your daily living. Mm-hmm. I don't care what it is. Nature, conspiracy, religion, relationship. You need something to manage that sense of personal meaning. The other space that I characterize around spirituality now, Phil, is it's what I call a before death, after or before birth, after death experience and perspective. We as humans do not agree on what happens before we're born or after we die. It's the greatest existential anxiety we have for our minds, which activates the survival instinct of the brain. So the survival instinct is here to make sure we're safe and we're alive. Mm-hmm. If I don't know what happens before I'm born or after I die, and I don't create a concept for that, then that existential anxiety just spins in uncertainty and causes more problems. For people with ADHD, with an underactive parts of their brain, they're already tweaking out their survival instinct with disruption. I tell people with ADHD, you must create a spiritual connection of what your understanding is before we're born and after we die. I don't care what it is. Give your mind something to follow. What do I believe? I believe we're spiritual beings that are pure light. And when we die or transition out of the human condition, we go back to that being pure light. What is pure light? It's a sense of bliss, and it's a sense of at ease, and it's a sense of the human condition is just full, of emotions, right?
Yeah.
Those emotions are splitting that spectrum of light into different colors. If you look at the color spectrum of purple, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, it follows the chakras of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality is we take that white light and we split it up, and then we call it emotions, and we get to go live the human adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have karma? Do we have past lives? Probably so. I don't get so far into the weeds on that for me because I enjoy looking at the stars and conceptualizing it, the meta spiritual part of life, because it gives me meaning. It's personal meaning along the daily, for daily living. I converted to Judaism 22 years ago, and I'm happy with my Jewish religion and understand it. It provides a lot of connection to me in my life, but I also make up the vast majority of my spirituality. I have a relationship with God as I understand God, and that much of that comes out of 12-step programs or as philosophy, but I have a friendly relationship with my sense of higher power. Mm-hmm. I believe God is the you, me, we of all of us.
Universal consciousness.
Yes. That I'm seeing God through you seeing God through me.
Namaste.
Yes. And that's as simple as it gets, folks. Don't overcomplicate it. Be kind. Appreciate other people. Understand the person you're looking at is just like you. Nobody gets out of the human existential state of anxiety or struggle. Nobody. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Be kind to each other. Try to help each other. There's two core emotions, right? Love and fear. They make up separate halves of the same circle.
That's the yin yang. That's chaos
absolutely.
and order.
And if you can't handle fear, then you can't handle love. That's my deal. People are like, they're trying to get rid of fear. I'm like, good luck. Fear is keeping you alive.
Yeah.
So respect it. Enjoy it. Understand darkness. One of the things I did in COVID, when COVID hit, COVID as a society, I don't think I've ever had a chance to talk about this professional. COVID as a society put us all in prison.
Mm-hmm.
The prison mentality is that my sense of freedom or free will gets limited at a level with which I cannot manage it, and it's a huge threat to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all suffering. So in March of 2020, I started a spiritual men's book study. And I pulled out my favorite psychological book in the world, which is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl.
It's the fourth time I had read it.
Logotherapy.
Yes, sir.
Between
Transpersonal
stimuli and response, there is a space there.
Yes, and that space is where life comes from.
Yeah.
So pay attention to it.
That's the now.
And so we read Viktor Frankl's book as our first book in my men's. We called it. I cannot believe I'm blanking the name of it because it's ended. We ended the book club. Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah. Is what we called our book club. And it lasted about 3.5 years.
What a great club.
Oh, it was critical for me because we all needed something as we dove into the darkness. I knew as a professional counselor, I was going to be eating darkness alive with people.
I can't imagine the darkness. That book is a story, a narrative through the Holocaust and through the concentration camps and how he was going to survive through the power of mindset.
Yes.
The stories he told himself.
And using his imagination.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
So seeing the light in the farm, fields and fields away as he was digging a shit ditch in the Holocaust camps.
Oh, my God.
Imagining being at that light rather than focused on where he was at saved his life. Well, he walked in with a manuscript into the Holocaust camps. He thought he could, of course, he didn't get to keep it. It was destroyed. Yeah. But it was all in him.
He had to write it
and he just added on to it.
Yeah.
So, it was written months, very soon after he got out of the Holocaust camps. It was birthed. And it's a seminal book. So, to me, that deep dive of living life on life's terms and not shunning away from it is so critical.
Yeah.
So critical. So what is spirituality to me? It's every moment of every day and being present to it as best as possible. Understanding my human condition is one that will disrupt itself.
Yeah.
Because that's just what it does. Don't over-personalize it.
Yeah.
Live within it. But have a deep meaning that continues to grow within your life. I cannot imagine where I'm going. I'm 62 years old. And I absolutely believe beyond the shadow of a doubt, I will live to 111.
You will.
I'm in better strength shape. I'm what I call right now draining my fat suit. I'm about 15 pounds down from I got about another 20 to go.
Yeah.
And the reality is I'm doing it based on consciousness.
Yeah.
Based on who I want to be.
James, we're getting close to about 2 hours, and I feel like I could continue this journey with you. I feel like this, I'd like this to be the beginning of a discussion that we have, and I'd love to continue it with you. I don't know what that means to you or what that means for us, but I feel like this isn't the end. I believe it's the beginning of conversations if you're open to having them. Yeah. Because there's so much here to focus on. I feel like we could dive into the book more. We could dive into your practice more. We could dive into any one of these things for a whole hour or 2 hours easily. Right. Just because your wealth of knowledge and your ability to tell stories and to really teach. Yeah. Is there anything you think we should touch on before we wrap up this session?
Living life on life's terms for me is an organic nature that's constantly growing and moving. And I think that we all short-sight ourselves by putting ourselves in boxes or in little lanes when it's a holistic picture that we're everything all the time. Yeah. And so in my treatment of ADHD, I want to find the person who's there. You've got to live beyond your diagnosis. The diagnosis is just a beginning step of understanding that begins to uncover the natural way with which you grew up or you were ordered. You can't, like I talk about, that's your hair color, height, and weight. Yeah. Accept it, live within it, and become powerful within it. Because there are gifts and purposes waiting to be uncovered. And that's really what I want people to be able to treat the emotional and mental stress of ADHD so that they can find themselves and get to where they want to be. Yeah. That's really what I'm after. Yeah.
What a beautiful journey and what a wonderful mission and purpose.
It's been a lot of fun. It continues to be.
I think I'm on that journey with you. Yes. Maybe a little bit, starting it a little bit later, but I think this show is a manifestation of that. Yeah, is a desire to follow shiny things and also to give back.
Right. But the reality is, the whole piece of Phails is that you look at your failures; they're nothing but what? A teaching tool.
Absolutely,
they're lessons.
Absolutely,
get over it. We are I have a funny thing I say about the human condition. The last thing I'll say about the humans: we are mistake-ridden beings.
Oh yeah.
So if you put a dash between the miss and the take, you just retake it, baby. Yeah. That's it. It's not hard.
I think of it as, the binary oftentimes people think is success and failure. And that's the binary people share, success and failure. And I don't think that's the binary at all. I want to redefine this. Right. Here's the binary: success and never doing anything at all, not starting. Right. And everything in the middle is failure.
Right. Exactly.
Failure is the inertia, the fuel, the motivator, the learning, the tools, everything that gets you to success. No one started at success.
No, it's the gravity of the human condition. It's just naturally there.
Yeah,
be okay
they had
with
to start.
And as my dear brother Paul would say in Canada, when you were nowhere, you are now here. I love flipping words around.
When you are nowhere,
you are now here.
He just Ram-Dossed us. Be here now is one of my favorite sayings. And he said, when you are nowhere, you are now here. I love this. And my buddy Bob that I interviewed, his was beware how. It's just like infinite curiosity or question of how do we present moment.
And I've really appreciated the conversation in so many arenas. It's always good to get, I've done podcasts for years now, and I will continue to do them to get information out there in a way that's meaningful, because you never know when someone's going to be listening at the right time and the right place to click on what they need to click on.
Heck yeah.
Which is why my the complex, the bunch of information on my website at jamesochoa.com is there.
Heck yeah.
I want people to go and get it, go look at it, go listen to it. That's how you make a difference in your life.
We're definitely going to point folks to you.
Well, thank you.
Get to know more about you.
I really appreciate it, Phil.
Thank you so much, James, for coming out and talking to me. I wonder, is there a practice we could do as we leave, folks? Another grounding practice. I love that part.
So one of the other, and this comes out of my wife, who's a life coach, and somewhat it's in the law of attraction kind of a space, but there is a practice of appreciation and gratitude called a 68-second model. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you're in a disruption or you're in a challenge space, if you can begin to grab something that's meaningful around you and find appreciation and gratitude for it, and you can time yourself for 68 seconds, you will change your perspective. You will shift out of that space.
So what would that look like if we tried it? Maybe I'd grab...
Yeah.
What would I grab? Like maybe I'd grab this little...
You could grab anything. I could look at the fire. I could look at even art that's here. I could see the piano.
And be grateful for it for 68 seconds.
Right. So we could start a 68 second. I've got a watch here. And I don't think I can't put 68 seconds on my... of course I can
put 68 seconds on the timer. I'm going to be grateful for... What if I'm grateful for you for 68 seconds?
Let's just start being grateful for the things we want to be grateful for. Okay. Let's start
68
now.
68 seconds.
I'm grateful for having been here today.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you being here and learning from you.
And I'm really grateful that we have a nice warm fire next to us on this somewhat of a cold day. It's going to get colder here.
Yeah. I feel a lot of gratitude for Austin Public, the organization, and Austin in general that subsidizes all this stuff that allows me to embark on this with you.
No kidding. And I am enormously grateful that I have the opportunity to come to a place like that here and just meander and really look at what is here, because I learn by hearing myself talk about the things that I know so well.
Yeah, I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my daughters. I'm grateful for, this home.
Yeah. I'm grateful for my family. I am grateful for my children and my wife, all the friends and the relationships I have.
Oh, yeah. That I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm so grateful for all the folks, all that are walking with me along this journey, the men that I share men's group space with, my best friends.
There's 68 seconds.
We did it, brother.
So that's all you got to do is pick out something and be grateful and appreciative for it for 68 seconds. When you're disrupted, set your watch for 68 seconds and just focus on gratitude. It will shift who you are.
Yeah. So James Ochoa has been our guest today. He is a licensed professional counselor. He's also ADHD Pathfinder. He's the author of Focus Forward, and he's going to have a new book coming out when the shiny wears off. Y'all make sure you're looking out for that. And I feel like this is the beginning of discussions, and I'm very grateful for the time we shared together. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Phil. I really appreciate you having me here.
Can we do high five?
Absolutely.
Boom.
Well, I like that.
I love you, dude.
Love you too.
Yeah.